I now move and give the floor to Ms. Robin Wall Kimmerer, Professor of Environmental and Forest Biology and Director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment at the Sunny College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse, New York. Ms. Kimmerer is the founding director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment, whose mission is to create educational and research programs which draw on the wisdom of both indigenous and scientific knowledge. Her research interests include the role of traditional ecological knowledge in ecological restoration and building resilience for climate change. I now ask Ms. Robin Wall Kimmerer to take the floor.
Thank you. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I am so grateful to be able to join today's fifth dialogue on the General Assembly of Harmony with Nature to commemorate International Mother Earth Day, as I believe that transformation of our relationship to the earth is among our greatest challenges and our responsibilities in this time. I would introduce myself in our traditional way. Bonjour, Shabadaske gish kokwe na dejnakas, Anishinaabe bodwe wadme kwenda, Megazen dodem, minwa mako, Mekwech kinegego gamijang. In my ancestral language, I greet you all and introduce myself as a Potawatomi woman, a member of the Anishinaabe peoples, of the Eagle Clan, and of the Bear. And I'm honored to be here and grateful for all that has been given to us. As we celebrate Mother Earth, let us begin with gratitude, for we are showered daily with the gifts of Mother Earth: food to eat, sweet air to breathe, and the preciousness of water. Gratitude for each other as peoples, for the privilege of our work together here today, and for the original peoples in whose homeland we meet. And although we come from many different places, we stand upon the ultimate common ground together here, with our feet upon Mother Earth. No matter what language we speak, we are grateful for the birdsong that greets the day. Can we agree that our lives are made possible and made sweeter by the other lives which surround us, both the human and the more than human beings with whom we share the earth? Shabadaske Gishkokwe, my name in my ancestral language, refers to light shining through the sky onto the face of Mother Earth, and I carry responsibility for that name, but I never would have dreamed that that responsibility would lead me here. For you see, a little more than 100 years ago, my grandfather was taken away from his family in Indian Territory to a government-run boarding school where the policy was to wipe away every trace of the indigenous worldview from our people and replace it with the Western settler mindset. It is a miracle that today his granddaughter has been invited here to speak of our worldview at a time of accelerating climate change, as we enter the era of the sixth extinction, when the world now has need of the wisdom that was nearly driven to extinction. This very fact is a source of great hope, for it shows that the world can change, that we human people can transform our beliefs, that we can together grow toward justice. And I must say that the perspectives that I will share today are not mine alone. They are the collective wisdom of our people and of the earth herself. I am a professor of environmental biology, an ecological scientist by training, working to create a symbiosis between indigenous and scientific knowledge systems. I am also by culture an indigenous woman, a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. My work has led me to understand the power of complementarity between these two different ways of knowing the world, which I think have tremendous benefits for sustainability. And since my grandfather's time, we have seen dramatic advances in the quality of life for some, and we have also seen the costs in environmental degradation, so much so that the UN Millennium Report calls into question our continued survival. As a plant ecologist, aspects of my scientific research involve how we might repair damaged ecosystems and return them to productivity. It is imperative that we restore the land from the damage that we have inflicted. But in my restoration research, I've come to understand something, that it's not just the land which has been broken. It is our relationship to land that has been broken. A key to sustainability is not only restoring the land, but restoring our relationship. If we are to survive, and if our more than human relatives are to survive as well, we need a change in worldview. After receiving your kind invitation to speak about traditional knowledge and worldview, I asked my Potawatomi elders for their thoughts as carriers of the Indigenous worldview. And their answer surprised me at first, because their response was just a single word: moccasin. And the derivation of that word. The word moccasin literally means to walk gently upon the land. This is the richness of Indigenous languages and worldview, that even the word for shoes carries ethical teachings. Walk gently upon the Mother Earth. And the question, of course, is how do we do that? How do we walk gently on the earth and at the same time provide dignity and well-being to the world's people? These are the same questions addressed in the UN post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals. The goals of envisioning and negotiating these aspirations is a major achievement, demonstrating a strong commitment to alleviating environmental damage and improvement of the human condition. And member states have made great strides. They ask much of us, as well they should. And the arguments for transformation of our worldview are both pragmatic and ethical. The dominance of the anthropocentric worldview may limit the achievement of the 2015 Sustainable Development Goals. In a biocentric worldview, science, economics, ethics, and values are more closely aligned with one another, bringing the scientifically sound into alignment with the morally responsible. As a scientist, I've come to understand that while science is a powerful tool that should play a primary role in our decision-making, it is not the only tool. One of the traits of science is that it strives to be purely objective and strictly material in its explanations, and the influence of values is intentionally excluded. However, many of the sustainable issues we face lie at the intersection of nature and culture. They lie with human values. And so value-free science cannot be the only approach we rely upon. Can we collectively imagine a new kind of science in which science is guided by Indigenous environmental philosophy? This new kind of science is well represented in ancestral ways of knowing, in traditional ecological knowledge. And this earth-centered worldview is part of our common human heritage. It is a worldview that still guides Indigenous cultures around the world. And it is in the hearts of many in the developed and developing worlds who long for its wholeness and the satisfaction of living in harmony with nature. Every one of us, we are all descendants of ancestral cultures living by the values of a worldview that understand that humans are just one member of the living community of Earth, and that we have responsibilities to ensure the thriving of our non-human species, our relatives with whom we share the planet. And the Indigenous worldview has been marginalized for generations because it was seen as antiquated and unscientific, and its ethics of respect for Mother Earth were in conflict with the industrial worldview that was bent on treatment of the earth as if what Native people call gifts were nothing more than resources destined for consumption by humans. But now, in this time of climate change and massive loss of biodiversity, we understand that the Indigenous worldview is neither unscientific nor antiquated, but is in fact the source of wisdom that we so urgently need. As we value these ancestral worldviews and the sustainability models that they offer, it's critical that we include Indigenous voices in decision-making and protect Native peoples' lands and cultures as global sustainability goals are adopted. Protecting Native peoples from harm from climate change and from the mitigation policies. The provisions of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples can be fully implemented as a complementary partner to sustainability goals. And I would very much look forward to the synergy created between the Declaration and the sustainability goals to further the vision of the Harmony with Nature initiative. And I want to emphasize that while the Earth-centered, biocentric worldview has antecedents in Indigenous philosophy, the worldview that we live by is not linked to genetic identity. A worldview is learned. A worldview is chosen. We will need to enlist artists and poets, storytellers and musicians to remind us of what we love, of what we value, what makes us deeply happy as humans. For the most powerful transformations are motivated by love. Like my elders, the Sustainable Development Goals also articulate the desire to walk gently on the earth, but with a rather different orientation to the world. And I understood the language of people-centered goals as an emphasis on the development benefits that should flow to people, that people's ideas and values and priorities shape the agenda, rather than institutions, governments, or corporations. But in this same language of people-centered, we might also hear the anthropocentric worldview that pervades our societies, that the natural wealth of the earth belongs and is rightly appropriated for human benefit alone. When we gather as nations, should we not also counsel on behalf of the tree nations, on behalf of the bird nations, the fish nations, on behalf of soil and seeds and our sacred water? Let us broaden our definition of people-centered to include them, our more than human relatives. We even see the anthropocentric worldview in our carefully crafted definitions of sustainable development. The goals revolve around the search for strategies by which we can continue to take from the earth into the future. When these definitions were presented to a group of traditional Cree elders, they observed, "It sounds to me like they're just trying to find a way to keep on taking," when the question we should be asking is, what can we give? What does the earth ask of us in return for all that we have taken? Our definitions of sustainability are embedded in the idea that human beings are fundamentally takers. The ancestral worldview offers another conception of ourselves as givers as well. And one of the hallmarks of the Indigenous worldview is that humans and nature are linked in reciprocity. As the earth sustains us, we must sustain the earth. And a fundamental piece of our philosophy asks, in return for the gifts of the earth, for all that we have taken, what shall we give in return? And the philosophy and practice of reciprocity, of returning the gift, is not just good ethics, it's how the biophysical world works. Balance in ecological systems arises from negative feedback loops, from cycles of giving and taking, living and dying, production and consumption, biogeochemical cycles. Reciprocity among parts of the living earth is what produces equilibrium so that life as we know it can flourish. It is reciprocity that produces harmony in nature. Positive feedback loops in which interactions spur one another away from balance produce radical change, often to a point of no return, such as climate change. And we have to understand that we, like every successful organism, must play by the rules that govern ecosystem function, and that law is reciprocity. The law of thermodynamics has not been suspended on our behalf. Can we turn our attention away from the fallacy of unlimited growth and embrace instead the covenant of reciprocity? How do we enter into reciprocity with the natural world? Traditional ecological knowledge is rich with examples. We exercise reciprocity through gratitude, through paying attention, through ceremony, through land care, through restoration, protection, regenerative economies, through environmental justice and acknowledgement of the personhood of all beings. There's more, but I'll only touch on two today that seem to me to be particularly linked to the Sustainable Development Goals of 2015. Let us consider the metaphor of one bowl and one spoon, as it is expressed by my Haudenosaunee neighbors, in which the gifts of the earth are understood as filling a single bowl from which we all might eat. It serves as a reminder that our very lives are dependent upon the generosity of the earth, and it reminds us that that bowl is not bottomless. And it's not just about the bowl, it's also about the spoon. There's just one. It's the same size for everybody, not a little teaspoon for some people, and a big gouging shovel for others. That bowl is meant to be shared by all people, and that includes the bird people and the tree people. The fish people have just as much need of the river as do humans, and an equal claim upon it. The gifts of Mother Earth are being destroyed in many cases in order to bring profit to a few and continued poverty from many. The teaching of one bowl and one spoon challenges privatization and corporate control of common resources. The gifts that Mother Earth provides freely to all people, such as water, should not be privatized. The development goals rightly recognize that constantly accelerating consumption is one of the greatest dangers that we face, especially when we know that consumption is tightly tied to climate change. Traditional ecological knowledge offers insights for what sustainable consumption might look like through the indigenous canon of principles and practices that govern consumption, known as the honorable harvest. The honorable harvest is rules of sorts that govern our taking so that the world is as rich for the seventh generation as it is for us. The honorable harvest is a covenant of reciprocity between humans and the living world, and its protocols offer inspiration for how we might walk gently on the earth, while at the same time satisfying human needs. It is a practice both ancient and urgent. And these guidelines for the honorable harvest were taught to me by generous plant teachers, while respectfully picking medicines or picking berries. But it applies to every single exchange between people and the earth, to everything that we consume. We are taught that in taking from the earth, we are never to take the first. Never taking the first means you'll never take the last. And then we ask permission. If you're going to take a life, you have to be personally accountable. And I know in some places that if you talk to a plant, they'd call you crazy. But in a worldview that regards them as people, we just call it respect. If you're going to ask permission, you have to listen for the answer, and if you're granted permission, then you take only what you need and not a bit more. The Honorable Harvest counsels that we take in such a way that does the least harm as possible. It says, use everything that you take. It's disrespectful of the life that is given to waste it. We've forgotten this, that the easiest way to have what you need is not to waste what you have. Be grateful. Gratitude is powerful. It is so much more than a simple thank you. Gratitude reminds us that our very existence relies on the gifts of others. And gratitude is humbling. It reminds us that we are just one member of the democracy of species. It reminds us that the earth does not belong to us. The next tenet of the honorable harvest is to share it with others. The earth has shared generously with us, and so we model that in return. And then reciprocate the gift. In return for the gifts of the earth, we are called to give our own. And finally, to take only that which has been given to us. And today, our social institutions and our exploitive economies trap us in a profoundly dishonorable harvest. I wonder, if we had adopted the ancient practices of the honorable harvest, would we today be afraid of our own atmosphere? I believe that we are today living in a transient period of profoundly painful error, but hopefully also of correction, on our way to a humbler consideration of ourselves. In the scope of human history, the Industrial Revolution that fueled the expansion of the exploitive worldview was just an eye blink ago. For eons before that, there was a long time on this planet when humans lived in relative homeostasis with biotic processes. There was a time when we considered ourselves to be the younger brothers of creation and not the masters of the universe. We are a species that can learn from the global mistakes we have made. We have stories to help us remember a different past, and we have imaginations to help us find a new path. We are a species who can change. And the danger is that we have been captured by a worldview that no longer serves our world, if it ever did. a worldview whose manifestation is destroying our beloved homelands, our fellow species, and ourselves. We need to move beyond the idea that the earth is our property to a life-centered worldview in which an ethic of respect and reciprocity can grow. The great philosopher Joanna Macy has called this the great turning, the essential adventure of our time, shifting from the age of industrial growth to the age of life-sustaining civilization. There's accelerating momentum of the transition already in progress in acts large and small, as humans reclaim an ancient way of knowing in which human life is aligned with ecological processes, not against us. The question is, will the circle turn in time to save us? And that's up to us. The UN has an honorable history of endorsing the expansion of rights, of human rights, of women's rights, rights of indigenous peoples. And this Harmony with Nature initiative has the potential to lead the UN to truly transformative leadership in leading the expansion of rights to Mother Earth. The right to be whole, the right to be healthy, for other species to exist and give their gifts. And in this spirit, I offer support for the Universal Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth. It's a good place to start. But as we commemorate International Mother Earth Day, I think what we need most is a declaration of responsibilities to Mother Earth. I'm under no illusion that the United Nations can change a worldview. But in naming our priorities, it can serve as a counterweight to those forces which undermine our values, our innate biophilia, and our responsibilities for life. We have allowed social institutions and extractive economies that science tells us are not sustainable and that our hearts tell us are not right. We can change that. The arguments are not economic, but moral. Human beings were given the abilities and the responsibility to care for the rest of creation. And when we look around us at the beauty of the earth, do we want to be the one species that threw it all away? Do we want to be the ones who violated the fundamental laws of reciprocity? As we give thanks for the earth, will we live in such a way that the earth will be grateful for us? The investments we need are to reclaim our roles in partners in the flourishing of the earth, in return for all the earth provides, in return for the privilege of breath. We humans are more than consumers. We have gifts of our own to give to the earth. We are scientists and artists. We are farmers and storytellers. We can join the covenant of reciprocity, seeking what Onondaga Nation clan mother Audrey Shenandoah called justice, not only for ourselves, but justice for all creation. Mi'il, miigwech.